baby pine trees in all of the trenches, and the more mature stuff, this 5 to 7 foot jack pine is gonna die out.
Right.
The cells got baked pretty much, and boiled, and so they will die within the next couple of years. Even the ones where you see that have the green on them,
right,
those are probably gonna not survive the fire event.
Mm-hmm. And then these, these bits that are in the trenches, are these things that you guys are trying to rehab yourselves?
Yep, these are ones. So this was harvested,
right,
and then trenched, and then planted. And so now that we had a fire, we're going to have to go through and do what's called interplanting. We'll have to figure out how many more trees we're going to need, because you're going to have definite death, and it's kind of, you can see some of these areas, like this one, you can see there's a green one up there that's untouched.
Yeah.
So you've got areas and you've got pockets that are going to be just fine, that we're not going to have to plant new trees in them. But then you're going to have areas where there's going to be nothing. And we strive for, there's a number of trees per acre that we strive for in our plantations.
Okay.
It makes for efficient management of the plantation over time. So, but the fire, also you can tell where it kind of cooked through. I mean, we're driving through the center of it right now.
Right.
So, and this was just kind of scuffed in with the dozer to create access. We're looking, all the standing snags, we leave as many as we can for wildlife.
Right.
But you'll see where there's a couple that are flagged along the edges that we leave most of the flagging through this whole fire has been taken down.
Okay.
But we leave those around some of them just because they're hazard trees, and we'd prefer if somebody's standing around them, they don't get hit with the tree.
Right.
So, but so as not to litter the landscape, pretty much one of the last things we do is go around and take as much of the flagging as you can see down. Kind of a cleaner forest.
Exactly. Yeah.
But
rehabilitating and then,
Yep.
and then practicing the leave no trace and just getting everything back to as normal as possible.
So this center road probably won't be touched, because it was really just scuffed.
Right.
But the outer edges, we'll more than likely we'll come back in with the dozer in a few weeks, and we'll scuff in the big parts of it. And then I haven't gotten the go ahead, but we may do, we call them tank traps. They're a big dip.
Okay.
And it's designed to keep out the ATVers, so that, because otherwise, you think about it, it's a big loop around this fire.
And it's perfect for them.
It's perfect for them, and they enjoy it. But it's not part of the trail system,
Exactly.
And it's not a forest road. So, but probably if you look out your window, you can. I mean, the fire was 2 weeks ago, and you can already see green grass sprouting.
Yeah.
So that's fresh, new grass coming in to replace what was there. So the seed bank is still there. There's still a lot of material there. So we look for a lot of that in this more mature stuff. That nothing will happen to it.
Right.
It'll just get kind of left because it's going to survive everything that happened on the site.
Exactly.
So we are coming up on here on the origin area. So
Okay.
This is where the fire started. And the presumed, or the best guess we have, was a campfire or a grill pit that somebody had going. This is a kind of a remote use campsite that it's not an official campsite, but it's the litter and everything is still there because we haven't gotten the go ahead from the sheriff to clean it out yet.
Okay, so it's like evidence basically.
Well, we just try not to, once we hand it over to law, we try not to interfere with them until we get everything back. Like here you can see where we dive off trail to get around this little sand pit.
Right.
Nothing will happen with that. That'll just get left eventually. It'll grow back in. You don't want to, try not to go through the sand, or even this thing will get sucked down.
You never know.
We had one of our big heavy wildland engines get sucked down in it.
Yeah.
We're like, all right.
Yeah, honestly, the heavier it is, the worse it does.
Oh yeah. So, but where you can see the the big rolls there from the dozer.
Right.
Some of that'll get gleaned back in.
Okay.
And then right where we came across there, they'll probably put a tank trap. Or we may come in with chainsaws and drop a dozen trees in this little stretch.
There you go.
To block it off. And we'll still have people that go around.
Yeah.
But, I mean, there's only so much you can do. So the big part is doing our best to make it an inaccessible, uninviting.
Exactly.
And all that work will probably happen within the next month.
Okay.
See, there's your blueberries.
Yeah. How big is the translation, I guess, from, ATVers and stuff in this season to like snowmobilers and stuff in the winter?
So we won't typically see snowmobilers coming in into here.
Okay.
Snowmobilers in the UP typically stay to the trail network.
Okay.
We have a fairly sizable trail network.
There is.
Up here, Paradise, Area Night Riders, they're the local club.
Yeah.
The trail is actually that road you came in on, the Vermilion Road. That is part of the trail network.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So,
and that whole thing spans the entirety of
Yep.
the UP into Wisconsin, too.
Yep. So that's actually Trail 8.
Okay.
So Trail 8 goes all the way through Munising, all the way across, and over to Kogiebik and beyond.
Okay.
So but you'll get a few people that, that locals, and see, you can see a nice trench here that didn't actually get anything.
Yeah.
The fire just kind of curled right over it. There might be a little bit of heat loss on some of those seedlings, but some of the seedlings...
It's interesting that, even in any given area where a fire is like total, the coverage still isn't total.
Right. So you'll get, you've got this little pocket of green right here.
Yeah.
So what stopped it at that, this trench was burnt right up to that edge. So, and then this edge and this edge. So what was it about this tiny little piece? A lot of it we refer to just the microclimate.
Yeah.
So there may have been extra humidity in that little area.
That's what I would assume.
There may have been extra, it was getting later in the night, so the fire didn't have the heat from the day pushing it. So you've got a lot of, I guess it just kind of balances itself down. There's another snag. We'll leave that one. Now, if we had to have been in here, if we didn't get that 2 inches of rain,
right,
several of those snags would have been dropped just for our safety and working.
Right. Because at any given moment, they'll just snap and go.
Yep. So we will, but because we got the rain, we didn't have to go in, and work is hard in a lot of these areas to put out the duff. So that saved the landscape too, because we typically will drive the trucks right through the fire edge or right through the fire to work those smokes. It's safer for us. It's easier on the equipment. The result is a lot of the snags get taken down and you lose that wildlife value that they have.
Exactly.
So every time we do a check of the fire, we always do the perimeter. Mm-hmm. And then typically I would get out and kind of wander for half hour or so, just smelling, looking for smokes. Most of the work you do is with your nose.
Yeah.
And
is there any ground temperature readings, or
we can
dig in? And
we actually have right there, it's an IR camera that fits on my cell phone.
Oh wow, that's incredible.
So I hook up you open it up and then you hook it right onto cell phone.
That's awesome.
And I can look, and I can see that in that black, you can see the trench.
Yeah.
Because it's black, so it's absorbing all that added heat.
Exactly.
So it takes a little while to learn the patterns.
Right.
But when you come out in the morning, in the early morning, when the sun hasn't really gotten on to the fire yet,
yeah,
you can make use of these you just scan across and you'll see a 40-degree spot, and you'll see a 170, 200-degree spot.
Yeah.
So you just know that that's a spot to at least go over and smell and look at and feel for.
And then from there, it's pretty much just raking it out and.
Yep. So we'll take our hand tools, and we'll scuff the ground. Here we have fairly thin soils.
Yeah.
So it might be that heat is just the sand retaining heat.
Exactly.
But once you get down, you might be a stump like that, and it's burning on the backside of the stump. And so you just break it up, scratch it down, get rid of as much of the material as you can, and scrape off all the ash and soot.
Yeah, and this is where we just came in from, right?
Yep, this is where we just came in from. So we just did kind of the southern half of it.
Okay.
We just kind of looked at the southern half. So this is where they were able to actually, there's more green material here because the dozer line was built in advance of the fire front.
Nice. There we go.
So this is where we were able to stop the fire and allowed it to just creep up to our line.
Right.
So that it wasn't us actually working to put the fire out. The fire ran out of fuel.
Yeah. You're just controlling it.
We're just controlling it at that point where we put in a control line and allowed the fire to burn to it. We try to do that whenever possible because it conserves the water in our tanks on the engines.
Right.
You always want to keep as much water as you can in your engine, unless you're doing mop up, and then you want to use as much as you can because you want to make sure there's no fire left
Exactly.
at each spot. So, but we just kind of, so we'll do some sampling plots, and there'll be a randomized sample. One of the foresters will design a grid. We'll go out and take sampling, and that will tell us how many trees need to be interplanted onto the site across the landscape. And then we have contract crews that do all of our planting for the state. So they will come in the spring, and this will just get added as a site into that planting.
Yeah, going into the future, how would you explain or describe the changes in your job from season to season?
So we always start in the spring.
Okay.
The spring is always our first season.
Okay.
We don't necessarily follow the calendar year,
Right.
or even a fiscal year. We go on so early March, mid-March, kind of middle of April is spring burn season. So a lot of us will rotate downstate to help with the wildlife and the parks burns that happen between Brighton, Rose Lake, Lansing, Plainwell.
Okay.
Then as the season, because we're still have snow up here.
Exactly, yeah.
So then as the season progresses, we move north, and eventually we'll be in fire season here. And so we're staffing all season long once we have snow off. And we staff until 6 o'clock in the spring every day, 7 days a week. And then once we have what we refer to as green up, usually mid-June, a little later this year, but typically mid-June we have green up, and we revert to a normal 8 to 4:30 workday.
Okay.
And that's when we start transitioning into doing some more of the we do cultivation work. We run the trenchers for the state. We run roller choppers to help prepare sites. We do road and bridge maintenance for the forest roads. So that's all falls in the purview of the fire staff.
Okay.
So we're kind of the equipment operators, the heavy lifters,
on the site.
Sites.
Yeah.
So when say there's an area that's got a forest road and it needs a new bridge put across a creek, we'll work with Eagle to get the permit. We'll put the bridge in. We'll set it up, and then maybe that bridge is going to be used for the next 4 years for timber sales in that area. And then when all of those timber sales are done, we'll go in and pull all that back out.
Okay.
So that's and then we that brings us right up to now, this time of year. And the whole time throughout, that we're still checking the indices every day. We're still running fire equipment every day. We're still being prepared for fire. In the back seat is my bag.
Yeah.
And my yellow shirt. my hard hat. I mean, they never leave the truck. The radios never leave the...
Yeah.
It's always with us no matter what we do. We go into Western fire season if we so choose. I volunteer to go out west. Other fire officers don't.
Like Western states?
Western states,
Yeah.
Manitoba, Ontario, going out to... we have an agreement with Texas. We send our dozers down to Texas to help them.
Okay.
We do a lot of work with Montana with our engines. And then we go to... But we can be ordered anywhere in the country.
Because it's still like a government federal...
It's still... Yep, it's
Yeah.
still... We have it's called the Master Agreement with the USDA. And so through the National Interagency Fire Center, they put an order in, a fire out in Oregon puts an order in for an engine.
Okay.
They get the order to Eastern area. Eastern area calls up the duty officer in Michigan and says, do you got a Type 4 engine available? And the duty officer looks at our availability and says yes or no.
Okay.
And if they say yes, we start driving.
There you go.
So, and then when fall and winter come in, traditionally the fire officers have managed the snowmobile program for the state.
Okay.
We're moving into a transition time when Parks is going to be doing more of that work. But traditionally that's what we've done. Now we'll probably add a little bit more timber prep, help our foresters out. Our foresters make up 3/4 of the fire staff. 200 other staff that help us.
Okay.
There's about 60 full-time fire staff.
Okay.
Give or take.
What would you say is the ratio between, fighting fires like this one or, coming in and starting like a controlled burn? Do you do a lot of that up here?
We do some. We've got one burn. Our windows are very tight.
Right.
To have the correct parameters, the correct winds, the correct wind speeds.
Yeah. Peninsula living.
Well, you've got to have enough, even downstate, if you've got a house, you've got to mitigate that smoke.
Right.
So you've got to make sure you're going to have that smoke lift above or go in a different direction. And at the same time, you have to have enough wind to push the fire that you want to create a good burn to get the effect you want.
Right.
We're not burning to burn, we're burning for a specific reason.
Exactly.
So if we're burning for a maintenance opening for wildlife, you literally want to cook and boil the stems of some of the woody stuff that's coming in because you want it to be maintained as an opening for grouse, for pheasant, for turkey, whatever wildlife has identified as the target species for that.
Okay.
We do some burns for parks for snakes. So we have to burn in a particular pattern. We do drop ignition. So we're just going to put a drop of fire, walk another 15, 20 feet, put a little more drop of fire. And we do that because it allows the snakes a chance to move out of the way. We're burning for the snakes, so we don't want to burn up the snakes.
Right.
We want to do it in such a way that they can get out to safety, but at the same time, they need that forest understory layer to be cleaned out.
Right.
In order to have snake babies, in order to get more snakes.
Yeah.
Some of them are cultivation burns. So we're burning them to get rid of all the woody debris so that we can trench and plant new red pine or jack pine plantations. Right. So every time we burn, it's for a very specific reason. And if you're not going to get that desired effect, you try not to do it.
Exactly. Which is, I'd say, the most important part of it is, just the focus on nature and keeping everything intact.
And that's it. Where, you're not just, and there's 5 layers of supervision and management that agrees that the burn's a good idea. Right. That we need to do the burn. Then we write the burn plans. They go through an approval process. And then we'll actually build control lines around the burns.
Before you even start.
And those could be done, like I've got a burn that we're thinking of doing for next spring, and we've already got the lines in.
Yeah.
but it's a matter of waiting until we get the right window, and spring is kind of the burn season.
Right.
We get better effects a lot of the time. And we have availability of staff.
Right.
I mean, some of our burns, you could need 15 to 20 people.
Exactly.
Because you've got to have igniters, you've got to have a burn boss, you've got to have a firing boss, you've got to have staff on the engines, qualified staff on the engines. You can't just have anybody.
Yeah. I think that's a big part, is just, realizing not just like the red tape and everything, but how many different facets and moving parts there are to things like this is what people don't realize.
I've heard it referred to as the clock. Everything,
Right.
An old world clock has thousands of gears.
Yeah.
Well, that's anytime you deal with a fire, whether it's prescribed fire or a wildfire, you're managing every one of those cogs.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how we limit ourselves, and having staff availability is big.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, a lot of our stuff, this was on a Tuesday night at, what was that, 6:30?
Yeah.
6:15, 6:30, this fire started, or was reported. And our station's an hour away. It took probably 30, 40 minutes to spool up staff to get them into the station.
Yeah.
So by the time we were actually on scene, it was probably closer to 7:30, 8 o'clock.
Okay.
And I mean, the local VFDs were here,
Yeah.
but they don't have the dozers. They don't have some of the specialized brush trucks that
Exactly.
we do. That's why they call for us.
Yeah.
So some of the trees are never gonna, that'll just become a scar on the
Right.
tree. And then we're back almost around to the origin again. So this is the whole fire. This is kind of the trail.
Yeah.
And when we originally built it, you couldn't have driven a truck like this around it. This is our 6x6 trucks, our old military deuce and a halves that have been outfitted specifically for working in this type of country.
Okay.
That's why when you read the press release and it said, difficult to access
Yeah.
terrain, sandy ground, there might have been 2 inches of rain on this, you wouldn't have noticed it 2 days later. The ground would have dried up.
And so basically, like, all of this, thick brush, moss, fern coverage, that's what was
burning, yeah.
Yeah.
We can kind of wanted to give you the loop of the fire,
No,
but we
yeah.
can get out and look. There's a no drone
right.
area.
Yeah, because I think there was, at least for the presser and stuff we used, there was, I think, one aerial footage.
Yep, that would have came from Air 3, Caleb, our pilot.
Right on.
He flies out of Escanaba. And he just happened to be the pilot on shift that night.
That's all it takes.
Well, that's it. So, we have a pilot based in Newberry, but he must not have been on. A lot of the fires, so Canada, the way Canada fights fire is different from the US.
Right.
They fight fire based on values at risk.
Right.
So if there is no value at risk, they won't even put a body there.
Okay.
It's not worth it for the safety of the people to put people on it.
Right.
If there's a value, then they will do it. And values could be, I guess be Kingsland now, but high value timber, like a fly-in fishing lodge. The value we were protecting in Manitoba was the giant electrical lines that come from the hydroelectric dam at the north end of Lake Winnipeg.
Okay.
That basically powers the northern Midwest.
Right.
So everything from both of the eastern half of both of the Dakotas all the way down to the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, all the way across into half of Wisconsin. It powers that and most of Manitoba.
Jeez.
So it was a pretty good value at risk.
Yeah.
We were told there's a town there, and we were told there's only about 1,000 people in the town. And we were told if the choice comes down to protecting the town or protecting the power line, protect the power line, and we will rebuild the town.
Yeah.
Like the power company's like, we'll buy everyone a brand new house.
There
we
you
don't
go.
care.
Yeah.
It's $25 million a day when that power line is shut down is what it costs the company.
Yeah.
They're like,
So at the end of the day, it's like...
Yeah, if we have to shut down for one day because of the fire, it's cheaper to just buy everyone a new house and rebuild this entire village. Rebuild this entire town.
It's apples to oranges.
Yep.
And I think in most cases, most people would probably be...
Yeah, they're small. I don't want to use the term destitute, but they are.
Yeah.
There is not a lot of income. There's not a lot of jobs.
Right.
In a lot of those areas, and so it's, they know. But I've been on fires in like Ontario where we're flown in and it's a remote fishing lodge and there's 10 people fighting a 600-acre fire for 2 weeks, and then we melon all the hose up and pull everything out and it's done.
I think I was somewhat aware of the difference in Canada with, just because of the size of the land area and, how remote most of it is.
That's it. And a lot of it is, so they do most of their firefighting operations are by helicopter.
Right.
Like we have engines, we have trucks, we have dozers. They are assigned a helicopter for their pilot. They go to a forward operating base. They'll base out of that spot for a couple of months, and they'll get assigned a helicopter with a pilot, and that's what their crew uses to go in. And they're put on a board with a red, yellow, green, 3 crews at the site.
Right.
The red crew has to be ready to be in the air in 10 minutes. Yellow crew's got to be ready to be in the air in an hour. Green crew's got to be ready to be in the air in 3 hours. Yeah. And they'll assign them just regular workloads around the compound to keep them busy until they're needed.
That makes sense. That's pretty seamless.
It's a really good system.
Yeah.
They do hover exit, which is cool. You get to jump out of the helicopter while the blades are still going, 10 feet above the ground.
Oh man.
Sucks when they push your bag out though in the marshes. Sucks. But it's fun. I mean, it's why I do this. That's why I have this program.
Right. A little bit of adventure.
A little bit of adventure. I may have been an adrenaline junkie since my high school days. I may still be an adrenaline junkie. Most people that do this, it becomes a lifestyle choice.
Yeah.
I mean, my wife, my kids, they all know that at any point I could be gone for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Any time of the year. I've missed Christmases, I've missed New Year's, I've missed Thanksgiving, Easter, almost every year.
Yeah.
I miss Easter. Birthdays. Anniversary. My anniversary's in middle of September. I'm usually gone out west on a fire. So my wife gets her flowers from the florist, not from me. Used to be key man because they would have key to the gate, and a key to the office, and a key to different things, and so they were called key man. Now they're called Michigan Wildfire firefighters. They're the part-time, as needed. Call them when it gets really bad to fill in.
Like the DNR reserve.
Pretty much, yeah. A lot of places downstate have got a pretty deep pool of them.
Right.
We don't necessarily have a deep pool of them up here. Several stations have got a couple. And it's really good for boosting our numbers in the spring.
Right.
So if we hadn't had the fire in about another 8 to 10 years, this is what it would look like.
Okay.
That's 5 years. That's 10 years.
Okay.
You can see the trenches, you can see, and that's the value we lost.